There are things you prepare for your whole life, and then there are the things that come wearing the face of someone you trust. I know that sounds like something you'd read on a greeting card. I used to think so too, but I'm 67 years old, and I've learned that the truest things often sound like that until the moment they become yours. My name is Eugene. I live in Decatur, Georgia, in the house my wife Vera and I bought 31 years ago when the neighborhood was quieter and the magnolia in the front yard was still short enough to see over. Vera passed 2.5 years ago. Congestive heart failure. She was gone 11 days after we knew. I keep the magnolia trimmed the way she liked it, which I understand is not a rational thing to do, but grief doesn't ask for permission. I spent 34 years as a licensed contractor, commercial builds mostly, schools, municipal offices, a few hospitals. I know how structures hold together and how they fail. I know where the load is and where it isn't. When I retired, I did it on my own terms, with a pension that covers what I need and savings that cover what I want. The house is paid. The car is paid. I'm not a wealthy man by any measure that would matter to someone like my son-in-law, but I was comfortable and alone, which is its own kind of situation to manage. My daughter is 38. She's kind in the way her mother was kind, which is the highest thing I know how to say about a person. She married her husband 6 years ago. He does something in logistics consulting that I've never fully understood despite 3 separate explanations. He speaks in outcomes and verticals, and I nod along because it makes her happy. He has always been perfectly pleasant to me. That's the word I'd have used before all of this. Pleasant, which I now understand is not the same thing as good. About 14 months ago in the fall, my son-in-law called me on a Tuesday evening, which was unusual. He said he'd been thinking about me, said he knew the 2nd anniversary of Vera's passing was coming up, and he wanted to do something. He said he and my daughter had talked it over and they wanted to help me get organized. He said it gently. He said, "Dad, we worry about you managing everything by yourself." I told him I was fine. He said he knew I was fine, but that fine wasn't the same as taken care of. He said they wanted to set me up with something, a financial management app, something he used himself for the business, something that would let me see all my accounts in one place, track my spending, flag anything unusual. He said he'd already looked into it, already downloaded it, and he could walk me through the setup in 20 minutes. I said that sounded reasonable, which is the thing I'd go back and change if I could. He came over that Saturday morning, coffee in hand, cheerful the way he always was. My daughter wasn't with him. He said she had the kids and would come by later. He sat at my kitchen table with his laptop and my phone and spent about half an hour setting things up. He showed me how the dashboard looked, where the numbers appeared. He explained that he'd linked my checking account, my savings, and my investment accounts so everything was visible in one place. He said I could call him anytime if something looked confusing. He patted my shoulder on the way out. I used the app the way he showed me. For about 6 weeks, I thought it was one of the more useful things anyone had done for me in a long time. The person who changed that was my friend Booker. Booker Crane and I go back 40 years. We met on a job site in Atlanta when we were both young men who thought they knew more than they did. He spent 20 years at a regional bank before moving into compliance work for a credit union. He is the most careful person I have ever known. He keeps paper records of things other people don't think are worth recording. We have breakfast on the 2nd Saturday of every month at a place in East Lake where the eggs are good and they leave the coffee pot on the table. I was telling him about the app, showing him the interface on my phone. He asked me who set it up. I told him. He asked me if my son-in-law had kept access on his end. I said I assumed he had, for troubleshooting. Booker didn't say anything for a moment. He has a particular way of going quiet that I've learned over 4 decades means something is wrong. It's not dramatic. It's just a stillness, like a man calculating load-bearing weight before he says anything out loud. He said, "Who authorized the account connections?" I said I had, or I thought I had. I had clicked through several screens while he walked me through it. Booker said, "I need to see your accounts directly, not through the app." That afternoon at my kitchen table, Booker went through my accounts the long way. He logged in through the bank's own website. He went through each account's recent activity, permissions list, and connected applications. He was quiet and methodical. He took notes by hand on a small spiral pad he keeps in his jacket pocket. When he was done, he sat back and looked at me with the expression of a man who is choosing his words the way you choose your footing on uneven ground. He said, "The app has read access to all 3 accounts. That's what you'd expect. But there's a secondary user registered on 2 of them, the checking and the investment account. Not as an owner, as a delegated manager." I said, "What does that mean?" He said it meant someone could initiate transfers on those accounts, request withdrawals, move money. Not without triggering some bank processes, but the access was there, and it had been there since the day the app was up. I sat in my kitchen chair and looked at the wall. Booker said, "I'm not telling you what to do. I'm telling you what I see." He said, "I want to know one thing before we talk further. Has your son-in-law ever asked you directly about what happens to this house?" I thought about it. There had been a conversation in the spring. Over dinner, the 4 of us. He had mentioned that properties in DeKalb County were appreciating faster than anyone expected. He said it almost off the top of his head, the way you mention the weather. He said, "Honestly, Dad, you're sitting on something a lot of people don't realize the value of." I had thought he meant it as a compliment. I told Booker. He wrote it down. He said, "I want to come back tomorrow with someone." The someone was his former colleague from the credit union, a woman named Ida, who now did private financial forensics work. She was around 55, precise, with the kind of demeanor that makes you feel like the room is slightly more orderly just because she walked into it. She spent 3 hours on my accounts. She found what Booker had found, and then she found more. The delegated manager access had not been set up through the app as an incidental permission. It had been created separately, intentionally, using a feature of the bank's business tools that most personal account holders don't know exists. Setting it up that way required knowing what you were doing. It required my login credentials, which I had typed in while my son-in-law walked me through the setup, and it required steps that did not happen on the screen I was watching. There had been a second window open on his laptop while he sat at my kitchen table. Ida said it quietly. She said, "This was not accidental. I went and stood at the kitchen sink for a while. That night my daughter called to check on me, and I talked to her for 25 minutes about the grandkids and a recipe she was trying and whether the weather was getting cooler. My voice was steady. I hung up and sat in the dark for a while after. The next morning I drove to the Decatur branch of my bank and asked to speak with a manager. I had Booker's notes and Ida's written summary, and I laid them on the desk. The manager, to her credit, took it seriously. She froze the delegated access while we talked. She said she'd need to flag it internally, but recommended I also contact law enforcement. That afternoon, I made an appointment at the DeKalb County Police Department's Financial Crimes Unit. The detective I met with was named Patterson. He was around 50, gray at the temples, and he asked questions in a particular order that told me he had done this before. He took the documents. He took the app name and the account numbers. He said he'd be in touch within the week. Driving home, I passed the stretch of Candler Road where Vera and I used to stop at a nursery every spring for 30 years. The building is a storage facility now. I thought about my son-in-law sitting at my kitchen table with his laptop open, cheerful, efficient, half an hour and then gone. Detective Patterson called me 4 days later. He said his unit had confirmed the delegated access was established without proper disclosure or consent, and that the manner in which it was created constituted fraudulent account manipulation under Georgia statute. He said his team had also identified 2 attempted internal transfers from my investment account, both of which had been flagged and held by the bank's own systems before completing. I hadn't known about those. My son-in-law had tried to move money twice, and the bank's thresholds had stopped it both times without alerting me. I pulled into the parking lot of a dry cleaner on Commerce Drive and sat with the engine running. Patterson said, "I need to ask you directly, are you aware of any pending legal arrangements involving your property or your finances? Any documents you may have been asked to sign recently?" I said no, but as I said it, I thought of something. 3 weeks earlier, my son-in-law had brought over a folder after Sunday dinner. He said it was something his accountant had suggested, just a way to simplify estate matters, reduce tax exposure for my daughter. He said it was nothing urgent but worth looking at when I had time. I had put the folder in the desk in my bedroom and not opened it since. I told Patterson. He said, "Don't touch it. I'll send someone over." The officer who came was young, maybe 30, and she wore gloves when she took the folder. I watched her slide it into an evidence sleeve and understood something about my own house in that moment that I had not understood before. I called Booker. He came over. We sat at the kitchen table with the coffee on, and he listened while I told him about the transfers. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. He said, "You need an attorney today, not tomorrow. My attorney is a woman named Harriet Odom. She handled Vera's estate, and I have trusted her for 15 years. I was in her office on Ponce de Leon before 9 the next morning. She read the financial documents Booker and Ida had prepared. Then she called in her associate, a younger man who specialized in elder financial law, and he read them too. What was in the folder my son-in-law had left was a transfer on death deed for the house, pre-filled with my name at the top, his name as beneficiary, and a line for my signature and date. Underneath it was a document revoking the existing beneficiary designations on my investment accounts and replacing them with a joint account he had established. There was also a single page of handwritten notes in his handwriting, observations, the kind that are written to be shown to someone later. I read them slowly. He had noted that I forgot to take my blood pressure medication on 2 occasions that he was aware of. He had noted that I referred to Vera in the present tense during a conversation last Easter. He had noted that I drove to the old grocery store instead of the new one twice before remembering they had relocated. Vera had been gone 2 years at Easter. I speak of her the way you speak of someone who shaped every room you have ever lived in. That is not confusion. That is love that does not have an off switch. He had written it down like evidence. Harriet sat across from me with her reading glasses in her hand and said, "He has been building a file. He hasn't acted on it yet. That means you have time." She said what Booker had said and what Patterson had said, in different words. Document everything. Change nothing outwardly. Do not sign anything. Do not let on. That last part was the hardest. Not because I am not a patient man. I am. I have waited out structural problems on job sites for weeks because you learn the right moment to act. But this was different. This was my own house, my own name. The accounts Vera and I had built over 3 decades of working, and I had to walk back into my kitchen and behave as though the green light on my phone was still just a dashboard. Over the following 3 weeks, I gave them what they expected, not recklessly, carefully. I mentioned, once, on a call with my daughter when I knew he was nearby, that I had missed a doctor's appointment and was having trouble keeping track of the new scheduling system. I mentioned separately that I was finding it harder to manage all the financial paperwork since Vera was gone. The response came in stages. My son-in-law brought dinner over on a Wednesday without being asked, and asked very gently whether I had had a chance to look at the folder he had left. I said I had glanced at it but hadn't had time to sit with it properly. He said no rush. He said he just wanted to make sure I was protected. He said that word with his eyes steady on mine. My daughter called 2 days later and asked if I'd thought more about the future, about having some help with the financial side of things. She said it the way she said everything, carefully, with love, and I believed that the love was real. What I was less certain of was how much she knew of what the love was being used to accomplish. The conversation that finished it happened on a Sunday evening at their house. The grandchildren were in bed. My son-in-law sat forward with his elbows on his knees, which is the posture of a man who has rehearsed what he intends to say. He talked about how much they worried, about how hard it was to see me carrying so much alone. He talked about Vera, the way people do when they are turning grief into a tool. He slid a folder across the coffee table. This one was cleaner than the one from my bedroom desk, my name at the top printed, his name listed as agent, a line for my signature at the bottom. He said it was just a starting point, just to make things simpler. He said we can go over it together, whatever you need. I picked it up. I turned the pages slowly. I said I would need some time to read through it carefully. He said of course. He leaned back. He was relaxed in the way a man is relaxed when he believes the outcome is already settled. That night I called Patterson and told him about the folder. He said, "That's what we were waiting for." 3 days later, Harriet set up a meeting at her office. She presented it to my son-in-law as a routine sit-down to review some estate planning documentation, something I had requested, nothing unusual. He agreed without much hesitation. I noticed that, the ease of it, the confidence. I want to tell you about walking into that room. My hands were still. I had expected them not to be. I had expected the anger to be somewhere in my body, in my jaw, in the set of my shoulders. But I walked into Harriet's conference room at 8:45 in the morning, and I felt the way I feel at the beginning of a complex job, when the plan is clear and the tools are in order, just the work to do. My daughter was already seated. She had come in first and hugged me, and her eyes slid away from mine. My son-in-law came in a moment later, leather portfolio under his arm, confident in the way I had always taken for capability. Detective Patterson was in the room. He introduced himself to both of them as part of an ongoing financial review connected to my case. My son-in-law's hand tightened slightly on his portfolio at the word case. Harriet opened with formalities. Then she placed a printed summary on the table in front of him. She said that a forensic financial review had confirmed the unauthorized creation of delegated account access using credentials obtained during the setup of a third-party application. She said 2 attempted transfers from my investment account had been flagged by the bank and preserved as part of the evidentiary record. She said this on clear, clean language, the way she said everything. He said that wasn't accurate. She slid a second document forward. Bank records, the forensic summary Ida had prepared, and written confirmation from the bank's security team. Patterson said, "We also have the folder." He meant the one from my bedroom desk. The photocopied pages were stacked neatly in front of him, the handwritten notes about medication and Vera and the grocery store visible at the top. My son-in-law said those were just notes. He said he had been documenting because he was worried about me. He said he was trying to protect my daughter's inheritance. Patterson said, "You were building a record to support a capacity claim that would give you legal control of those assets." He said it without inflection, the way you state a load calculation. My son-in-law held his composure for a while. He used the words worried and love and just trying to help. His voice stayed even. But he looked at my daughter, and my daughter was not giving him what he needed. She said, "His name, just his name." Harriet said, "There is also the email." She read a line from a message my son-in-law had sent to a colleague 4 months earlier. I won't reproduce it exactly here. The meaning was that moving the assets would be significantly easier once a cognitive limitation could be established on record. The room stayed with that sentence for a moment. My daughter put both hands flat on the table and looked at the surface. My son-in-law stood up. He said it was a setup. He said I had manipulated the situation. He said he had 2 years of documented concerns and that I was a proud man who could not accept help. He said Vera would have wanted my daughter to be protected. I looked at him when he said Vera's name. I looked at him for a long time. He stopped talking. I said, "Vera worked beside me for 30 years to build what we have. She would have wanted it to stay exactly where we put it." He sat back down. Patterson told him that his office would be in contact with his attorney regarding the account manipulation and the evidentiary documentation submitted to the bank fraud unit. He said it the way competent people say hard things, cleanly, without drama, just the facts of what was going to happen next. There was no arrest that morning. He left with my daughter, who looked the way people look when something they trusted has come apart in their hands. I stayed behind with Harriet for a few minutes while she made notes. She asked if I was all right. I said I was. I walked out to the parking lot and stood next to my truck in the October heat and looked at the street. Same buildings I had driven past for 30 years. I thought about my son-in-law sitting at my kitchen table with his laptop and his cheerful manner and his patience. Half an hour. Careful. Systematic. I said out loud to nobody in particular, "You should have just asked me." Then I drove home. My daughter called 4 days later. She had been crying, you could hear it, the particular ragged quality of someone who has been crying for several days and hasn't yet reached the dry sides of it. She said she hadn't known about the account access. She hadn't known about the transfers. She said he had told her he was worried about me, that he was doing it for her, that it was all for her. She said, "Daddy, I believed him." I said, "I know you did. I believed her too. I still do. But belief is just the starting point. It is not the same as repair. We are still doing the work of that, slowly, in the way that things between parents and children get rebuilt when they get broken. A Sunday call, a visit, sitting together without talking about it, which sometimes does more than talking about it does. I spent the weeks after the meeting changing every password and access credential I had. I worked with Harriet to revise the estate documents, assign a trustee with no personal interest, and put certain protections in place that should have been there for years. Booker helped me understand the account structures better than I had before. Ida reviewed everything twice. What I learned is that a man's life runs on assumed good faith from the people closest to him, and that assumed good faith is exactly where the exposure is. Not the locks on the door, not the alarm system. The assumption that the person handing you the coffee belongs to the same understanding of the word family that you do. Booker came over for dinner about a month after the meeting. We ate at the table in the dining room, which I had not used for anything but mail and silence since Vera died. It felt right to use it. He said, "You know what the thing I keep thinking about is?" I said, "Tell me." He said, "You had to hold very still for a long time when everything in you wanted to move. That's hard to do." He was right. There is a cost to that kind of stillness. It does not show up on the outside. But in the quiet of an evening, in the particular silence of a house that used to have 2 people in it, you notice what it took. I still walk past the desk in my bedroom sometimes and think about standing there holding that folder the first time, before I knew what it was. The way the whole shape of what I thought I understood shifted in the time it takes to read a page. The app is gone. All third-party access to my accounts is gone. I review every account directly through the bank's own website on the 1st of every month. Booker showed me what to look for, and I look for it. Some people would say that sounds like too much. Maybe it is. But I worked 34 years building things that were supposed to last. And I know that maintenance is not paranoia. It is just how you keep things standing. Here is what I want to leave you with, because I think you've stayed with me long enough to deserve the plain version. I am 67 years old, and I made the mistake of confusing pleasant with trustworthy. I made the mistake of letting someone into my systems because they said they were doing it out of love, and because love is a word that still has the power to move me. I do not regret that love moves me. I think the capacity to be moved is something worth keeping, even when people use it against you. But I know now that there are people who will look at what you have built and see a ledger, not a life. They will use your grief as evidence of your weakness. They will use your trust as a mechanism. They will use the names of the people you loved most as a way to get past your defenses, because they understand that those names still open something in you that nothing else can. If someone in your life is paying close attention to your routines, your finances, your health, your decision-making, in a way that feels different from how people who love you pay attention, take that seriously. Write down what you observe. Get a second opinion from someone who has nothing to gain. Talk to an attorney before you talk to them. And if someone offers to set something up for you, to organize your finances, to simplify your accounts, to make things easier, take all the time you need before you hand over the access to make any of that possible. Not because everyone is like my son-in-law. Most people are not. But the ones who are will use your openness faster than you can recover from it. Your home, your accounts, your name, your right to be the person who decides what happens to everything you spent your life building, those things are worth the effort of protecting. Real love does not need your passwords. It does not need administrator access. It does not need a line at the bottom of a page with a space for your signature. If something in this story felt familiar, don't keep that feeling to yourself. Talk to someone. Write it down. These situations survive because good people stay quiet about them. They don't survive when someone finally says what happened out loud. Take care of yourselves out there.